Hello, everyone, and welcome to Preemie Chats, a space where we connect, learn, share stories about the world of prematurity. I'm Leah Whitehead. I'm a proud preemie parent and former journalist, and I'm honored to have you join us here today for today's Preemie Chats. Preemie Chats is brought to you by Canadian Premature Babies Foundation. You may also know them as CPBF, a parent-led charitable organization dedicated to supporting families, advocating for the needs of premature babies, and providing the latest information and resources to help parents and caregivers navigate their journey. So whether you're a parent, a healthcare professional, a researcher, or just someone interested in learning more about prematurity, you are in the right space. Together, we are building a supportive community where stories are shared, questions are answered, new evidence is explored, and no one feels alone. I want to invite you to visit our website, canadianpreemies.org. It's there on the screen. There you will find helpful resources, our latest projects, and most importantly, a community of people who want to see our little babies thrive. If you're watching live today, please join the conversation. It's always so interesting to see where people are watching from and to hear their comments and questions. And if you do have questions, then we will try to address them during today's program. So just put them in the chat. And if you're watching a recorded session today, you can still connect with us through our website. It's through meaningful discussions like what we are about to have where we advance practice and grow together. So thank you for being here and bring your voice to the table today. Now, you've heard us say so many times at CPBF that we're more than a charity, we're a community of people. And before I had a preemie myself, I wouldn't have understood that connection that exists between preemie parents and really all members of the preemie world, including healthcare professionals and support people. And I think partly because it's such an intensive experience, that there is a connection that's hard to put your finger on. It's hard to explain. Today, we're going to be talking to the mother of a surviving twin born 4 months prematurely and 4 angel babies who integrated her lived experiences of trauma, healing, and hope into her work, which more recently has been the publication of an amazing and unique book entitled From Rollercoasters to Carousels, an emotional support guide for parents. It is part memoir, part global parent narratives, and part healing manual. The book zeroes in on the 7 most common emotions parents experience in these spaces. From there, she gently guides the reader to move from trauma to healing, one emotion at a time. You are in for a treat today. There are some people who you meet who you just connect with and who are genuine and authentic and vulnerable. And I think that's something that can be difficult with our own journeys. And so I'm really excited for you to meet the author of this book who's here to speak with us today. And she's going to open up this space of discussion. So bring your questions, your comments, and experience, please. Gigi Khonyongwa-Fernandez is a trauma-informed leadership coach, consultant, and advocate with a deeply personal connection to trauma and passion for resilience, healing, and finding joy. With an almost 20-year background in healthcare across 2 continents, Gigi combines her clinical and management expertise in the sector with compassionate and positive leadership. She specializes in trauma-informed coaching, maternal infant health, and holistic leadership and organization development, working with individuals, teams, and institutions across various sectors. She's an international speaker and advocate. She holds multiple global board appointments in the NICU and maternal infant health spaces. She's originally from the US, but she now resides in London with her Spanish husband and British son, drawing inspiration from them, as well as her travels to over 25 countries. From Rollercoasters to Carousels is her first book, And what a first book it is. Thank you, Gigi, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Leah. It's amazing. I'm just so looking forward to being in this space with you. And then I was listening to you. I was like, who is she speaking about? I don't know that person.
Pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you. That was so kind. Thank you so much.
I wanted to start today by just getting you to give us a bit of context surrounding your book. What's it about, and why should people pick it up and read it?
Yeah, thank you. It is a book about the things that we all experience, or many of us experience, especially within the maternal health space, but we often don't talk about. And it's so we suffer in silence. Many of us do. And so I did the same. My journey, my loss journey, my NICU journey, and also my parenting as a child with special needs. You have all these different things that we experience, but we don't have anywhere or any space to kind of put them. And so it is, I guess, the first step in, or first reason, I guess, in that I wanted to bring that to light is that we as a community no longer suffer these emotions in silence, to acknowledge that they exist. And the second part is to acknowledge that you can heal from them. And it's a process. And I think I sort of thought that all along, but as I started writing the book, because this has been in my heart and head for about 10 years, 10 plus years, actually, maybe 15 years. But it wasn't ready to be birthed yet, for lack of better words. And about maybe 2.5 years ago, I started writing it. And then I wanted to also hear from parents around the world. And I was really honored to be able to speak with so many people around the world, including Fabiana, about their stories and about their emotional journey. And I think that's the key, because we oftentimes talk about our journey, our preemie journey, our NICU journey. We don't talk about our emotional journey. And that is the journey that oftentimes dictates how we parent, how we heal, how we move in this world. And so I wanted to bring that to light, and so people know that they're not the only ones dealing with anger. They're not the only ones dealing with, being completely overwhelmed post NICU. And many of the people that I spoke with, two things that came out with: no one's ever asked me how I felt. You're the first person I've actually talked, how I was really feeling. Yes. And many people had these, I'm talking about people 5, 10, 15, 20 years post, 30 years post. So the intensity of emotions is real, and it exists, and it doesn't matter where you are in this world. But when you are NICU bereaved or special needs parent, you experience these. I mean, there are others, but these were the 7 that kept coming through time and time again. So I guess, so to summarize, it was really to acknowledge that these emotions exist, and the emotional journey exists, and it is real, and it impacts us in so many different ways. But also I don't want to leave people there. The other part is that healing exists as well, and you create your own healing. How you do it, when you do it, where you do it is up to you. And what I do through the book is open the door for you to start that. To start the healing process. To ask yourself queries that maybe you had never asked yourself before. And it sort of makes me think about, I don't know if you've heard of Peter Levine, who's a well-renowned sort of trauma expert. And one of the things he talks about, I'm sort of paraphrasing his quote, but he said, trauma exists in the absence of an empathetic witness. And so I feel like in many ways, the book and my voice and my journey and others' journeys that are walking with me through the book, and as readers are walking me through the book, we are providing each other that empathetic witness space, so that we can have a space to begin to heal and to grow collectively and individually. I don't know if that answered your query.
Yeah.
But that is what,
and you've started the ball rolling already, because Kira said in the comments, knowing we can heal rather than simply cope is very powerful.
Yes. Yes. And that is so incredibly important. And the other part of that healing, Kira, is that, and I say it in the book too, is trauma isn't linear and neither is our healing. And that is so important because, and I didn't want it to be okay, first you do this step by step, you do this, you do this, because that's rubbish. That doesn't happen. We experience trauma in so many different ways. They intersect, depending on our experiences, depending on our family situation, depending on our culture, depending on a number of things. And so it's important for us to understand where that comes from. And then that in turn helps us to heal. And Kira's correct in that oftentimes, and I say, the healing is a process. And also processing is a process. So we have to allow ourselves that space to actually begin that healing process. That's why we say it's a journey, because it's a never-ending journey, and it twists and turns. But hopefully, like the title of the book, we're moving from this jarring roller coaster, which is what we experience during the acute phase, and even post-acute phase, to a more carousel. So we're still moving. There's still going to be things that pop up, but hopefully we can begin to manage and live with them and navigate around and with them in a way that's much more healing, much more calming, much more forward moving than before.
What I found as I read your book is, and as you're speaking now, this isn't a space, as you said, that has been explored. And it feels like what you're doing is giving people permission, and that space to experience came to a point of giving yourself permission to explore those emotions, because you share your journey in the book, and it's not simple or straightforward. And I think many of us can attest that the birthing experience and even parenting is not a straightforward journey. And sometimes you're in the go phase or the crisis phase, and you never get to that point of giving yourself permission. And so how did you get to that point with yourself?
That's a very interesting question, and a very good question. I think even before I put pen to paper, I didn't want to be as vulnerable. I didn't want to go there. It's like, I don't want to go there. I'm going to just, sort of hide behind my sort of professional mask. I know sort of, I am a trauma-informed therapist, so I know, for trauma-informed coach, sorry. And I know some things. So I'll hide behind that because that's okay. But I had to tell myself that that wasn't real, and that wasn't being honest, and that wasn't going to amount to anything. And because of what I really wanted to do, like I said earlier, was open that door to healing, open that door for the discussion, open that door to have that conversation, and to be honest with ourselves. And I had to sort of, my process, I guess, in doing that is to give myself permission to say, it's okay. It's okay to be wherever you are, whomever you are, in whatever space. And I think that's incredibly important for this space, for the whole sort of, NICU, bereaved, and special needs and maternal infant health space, because there's such an internal fight. You're dealing with so many different things at one time that you really don't know if you're coming or going. And oftentimes I say, we have to begin to pause. I always say, Kira knows this, there's power in the pause. We have to be able to stop and be able to say, what actually is going on here? What did I really experience? And so I had to give myself permission to do that. But it's interesting, Leah, when I said, Gigi, if you're going to do this, you got to be real. You have to be yourself. You have to show warts and all. Otherwise, there's no point. when I said that to myself, many versions of that to myself before, there was a weight that was lifted, but also I felt a responsibility to whoever was going to pick up that book, or whoever was going to share it with someone, that it also needed to be real and honest. And so it was interesting when that occurred, as I was writing the book, there were things that, I mean, I had to pause because I realized, oh, I hadn't even dealt with this. Oh my goodness, things were coming out for me that I thought I had resolved, or like Kira said, I had coped, or I had managed, or I had put that away, or I had whatever I had done. I thought that it was, it had passed. And so that again made me realize, oh, wow, this is something that we all need at various points of our lives, because it's going to come up in various ways if we don't heal. And it's a continuous process. And that's the thing. I don't want people to feel like, okay, I've healed and that's it. Because things happen, like you said, so many things happen within this space at various points in our lives. I tell you, I say in the story, my son lost majority of his sight because of as a result of his premature journey, and he's now 18. And when he became 16, all of his cousins and friends were getting their license, and he said, "I can't get my license. I won't be able to drive." And I went right back to the feeling guilty, the feeling grief, the feeling of, 16 years later. And so that's why I say that the emotions, the healing of the emotions is continuous. And what I'm wanting to do is provide people those tools that when things come up, and they come up in so many different ways. I would have never thought driver's license, would cause me grief again. That wasn't even on. So I think it's, I had to just allow myself to be in the same space that we're all in. I had to give myself permission to be real. And, that was a little bit difficult, but I'm so glad that I did, because what I've been getting back from people is that's the part, not from my journey, but also the other parents and professionals who I interviewed, their journeys, that they, it helped people feel like they were not by themselves.
I love, we talked about how it's not a linear journey. And Kira, again, had another comment about that with your book, because it's not like your typical book of walking through the chapters.
I'm not a typical person, Leah. I'm a bit odd. A little bit odd out there.
That's how we get to these unique, different ways of experiencing even a book. It was like, okay, you can go through and choose. So Kira said, that's what I love about this book. It really is a guide you can pick up at any point as we move through life seasons with our NICU kids, because here you are talking about that grief popping up again.
Yes.
And it's not something that we can kind of put away on a shelf and, that one's dealt with and moving on to the next one.
Yes.
And so even how you wrote the book, how did you come up with that?
Yeah. And I think that was very important, that I didn't want it to be a typical step-by-step guide. And I knew that I was experiencing, and all the parents that I've been honored to sort of be a part of this entire journey, the ones I interviewed, people I didn't, was that we experience these things so many different ways, these emotions so many different ways, and so many different times. And it was important for me that the journey wasn't a sort of textbook standard step-by-step journey. The journey was what you needed as a reader. And I sort of imagined in my mind that it was one of these things where one of these books where you could pick it up, and jump to whatever you needed to jump to in order for, to get what you needed. And because again, it goes back to the whole point about it's not linear. And I didn't want people to feel like, okay, I'm really dealing with fear, but I have to go through this whole, to go through anxiety, anger. No, you jump where you need to jump, be there, stay there, and then I mean, for me, that was the importance, because that's the journey of healing. Is not text. It's not sort of step by step by step by step by step. So just want to make sure 1 second, because I'm making sure that my connection doesn't go. It's giving me a message. I'm so sorry about this. 1 second. Let me just make sure.
That's okay. In the meantime, we did get a comment from Nina that will pop up. She says she's so happy to be a part of this talk. Thank you for joining us, Nina. How's your connection there? Looking
good. It's good. I have to tell the audience, like, I'm not in my typical space, so it's I'm trying to make sure I stay in my carousel, even though I'm not in my space. But that was important for me, to make sure that the journey, the reader journey, mimicked our journey, going through these emotions. And it's definitely not a textbook sort of standard book. It's very much, I mean, I've had people say, I just kind of stayed. I didn't realize I was dealing so much with anger, and I stayed there. And so again, going back to the permission thing you mentioned a second ago, it was very important for me to have the permission to go wherever I needed to go. And I wanted to give that same permission to whoever was reading the book. And, I tell people, you don't even have to read the whole book. You read what you need. And so in my mind, you go back and you sort of flip the pages, write something down, go back. But what the idea and hope is that each time you go to that space, you're stronger. You have something else, another tool, another thought process, another voice through other parenting voices, another resource that you can begin to use to move you further and further and further along that healing journey.
And that was the other part too, is that you gave room at the end of each chapter, or section, I'll call it, where you could journal and reflect, and really, and you're right. I think every time I read it, or every time someone reads it, they could be in a different space and re-journal that part of their journey again. It's not that one and done kind of experience.
Exactly. And intentionally, I did not call them chapters because of that very reason, because again, it is a journey. And it's not linear, and it's not, your journey is very different from mine. And that was something that I, just in going through this space, and I'm pretty sure many of the listeners can, relate to this, is, you can have a very similar journey, sort of the, I guess, nuts and bolts of the journey, but the way you experience them, completely different. And so that's where, part of the journaling aspect, we know journaling scientifically works. It helps us to kind of get what's in here and here out. It also helps us to be able to begin to look at what we're actually dealing with in a very objective and forward-moving way. So we know, it's research that journaling does help as part of the healing process. But it was also important within that space that I sort of, I guess, my sort of role in that was to gently nudge you to think about, well, what is this emotion for you? What do you want for it? How do you want to move with it, to dance with it? How do you want to put it away? Because that's the authenticity about it. That's the realness of it. It's not a cookie cutter. What does Leah want? What does Kira want? What does Nita want? What does whoever else is on this call? And that is so personal, so individual, so authentic to your healing. And it's so important for your healing. That you had that you were given the permission to do that. And so that's definitely one of the reasons why I wrote it in the way that I wrote it, is that I wanted you to be able to decide for yourself how you wanted your healing journey, how you wanted it to be, what you wanted it to look like.
I love that. And I love the I alluded to it in my intro, and then you talked about it a little bit as well. And that is that there is something about this journey that creates connection, even though we
Oh,
are all on an individual journey. And so when I was reading your book, and I think what made it so rich and full were those interviews that you had
mhm.
from parents around the world. And I mean, it's so, you read someone's journey from someone on the other side of the planet, and
Yeah.
it still hits like, oh, that that was me too. And
Yes.
so it is
Yes.
that individual and also the collective.
Yes. Yes. Emotions are universal. Those emotions were universal. And it was so, I mean, I'm so thankful and blessed and honored to have been, you know, given the permission from these incredible parents from every, part of the world, walk of life, etc. And, you know, that they entrusted me with, their, parts of their story.
Mhm.
And what was interesting for many people that I spoke with was, I did say, is like, this is not a traditional tell your story. Because what we do is when we say that, we go straight into our children. We go straight to our children, da, 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 da. But we forget about ourselves.
Mhm.
And I didn't want that. I want the spotlight to be on you as the parent. What do you need? How do you need it? Where do you need it? What don't you need? Because sometimes we think, because that's the thing with, with being, in the NICU, loss and especially in space, we're so used to others telling us what to do, doctors, nurses, therapists, and for with good intention, family, friends, etc. But our voices are just become null and void.
Mhm.
And so it's very important for me to be able to to say what you need is very important. And I say, I think I say in the book that the parents' voices that are interviewed, they're like the gold dust that sort of, they sort of brought brought it to life, because it was, again, it showed that you're, like you talked about earlier, we're a community. And it
Mm.
doesn't matter if you're in Africa, in Brazil, in Canada, in the US, in Hungary, in Germany, it didn't matter where you were. We all experience those emotions to varying degrees. And for me, the universality of it was incredibly powerful to help you heal. Because so many people that spoke with said, I thought I was the only one.
Mhm.
I thought I was the only one experiencing this. I thought I was the only one, um, you know, grieving, even though my child was living. I thought I was the only one, that was angry about what had happened. And so, giving yourself permission to say that is part of the healing process, because it allows you to open that door. And even if you open that door and you're not ready for it and you need to close it back, that's fine. Because you can always go back to it when you're ready, and open a little bit more, a little bit wider. And that was another reason why, Leah, not just the interviews, but it was also important for me to leave people with resources.
Mhm.
So at the end of the book, I put, wherever you are in the world, you can, contact these organizations and these individuals, and they will assist you. So again, I didn't want that the feeling of community, the sense of continued healing, the sense of you're not isolated in this journey, no matter where you are in this journey, no matter where you are in the world. That was very important for me to give to readers.
I wanted to talk about the 7 emotions that you zeroed in on. And how did you get to that point of choosing the big 7 that are included in the book?
Um, I had my ideas, but really what shaped that was when I started interviewing people. Because I had about 3 or 4 of them that I sort of thought, okay, I know I experienced this, and people that I've been around and I've coached, they've experienced this. But I wanted to know what really was happening. So I interviewed a lot of people. And what I have to say is many people that I interviewed, all of their stories were not able to be in the book, because I would have had to have done like a, J.K. Rowling series or something, of Harry Potter. It would have been so many. And I wanted to be able to put all the things in, but I couldn't. But I asked, what are the top three? One of my queries was, what are the top three emotions that you experienced during your journey? Then I also asked, what were the top three emotions that you're experiencing now? Wow. And interestingly, those were very similar. Mm-hmm. So that told me that healing had not occurred, and people were still holding on to things, like I said, 5, 10, 15 years later. But the people that allowed me in their space, to interviewing, and also other ones, who, like they were not in the book, but they contributed in other ways, they helped to flesh out that list even further. And so I chose those 7 came to be because those were the ones that came up time and time and time and time and time again. They were the consistent ones, no matter who I was speaking with, no matter where they were in the world. And so I landed on those. And what I did was, just for ease of reading, not because this is how I want you to go through it, but I just put them in alphabetical order just so you can easily find them.
Yeah, I loved that. It again makes it easy to go to the one that's relevant and how you're feeling. One thing that I thought was interesting in your book that I experienced when I worked in NICU after I had been there myself as a peer support person for about 10 years. And one thing that people talked about that you also talk about in the book is relationship breakdown with those who were in our life, let's say pre-experience, whether that's loss or NICU or parenting children with special needs. And you talk about it very graciously. And I just wanted to touch on that because I think that's something that causes a lot of hurt and pain when the people who we expect to show up for us, who have been there in our lives, sometimes for years, and then they don't show up in the way that we need them to when we're going through trauma or NICU experience or preemie journeys. And so what did you learn about that, and why was that important for you to include?
Yeah, because that's a brilliant query. I think there were 2 reasons. One, because parents themselves, that was something that came up again, how they experienced, how they lost, relationships changed, and relationships were lost during this period. But also, this book, although we have a target audience, is really for anybody who's experiencing trauma. And I also wanted to gift anyone who's supporting someone going through this space, going through this journey, to be, better equipped, for lack of better words. And going back to what I said earlier, when I was, quoting Peter Levine, the trauma expert, when he talked about trauma, trauma occurs in the absence of empathetic witnesses. When you talk about relationship breakdown, you lose your empathetic witness. You lose that safety. Many parents I spoke with talked about their tribe, that they lost their tribe, and they had to find another one, and that is scary in itself, and that the sort of pre-tribe could include, family, friends, co-workers, whatever that sort of safe space you thought, that you could kind of be yourself. And you became very, very aware that, oh, wow, this is not, one of the parents talked about, I needed people who I could sit in the yuck. They could sit in the yuck with me. I didn't need you to tell me what I needed to do, what I needed to feel, how I needed to feel. And I surely didn't need you to tell me, oh yeah, I know somebody else that, that had twins or triplets, and their babies are, whatever, fine, and no. So there's so much. It was important for me to give the gift to the reader, whether that be a parent or whether that be an ally, whether that be, a professional, that a huge part of healing sometimes is just being there.
Mm-hmm.
Just being there in silence sometimes is healing. And then allow that person to let you know what they need, depending on your level of, of intimacy with them. And it's, we know there's some research around, when babies are ill. So there's research around babies who have children who have cancer, that relationships break down when you have a long-term medical complication. That they have a higher risk of marriage breaking down, partnerships breaking down, etc. Not so much. We don't have a lot of, at least I'm not aware of a lot of data within the NICU, bereaved and special needs space, but I would imagine it's very, very similar. There is some research around, the high anxiety increases, how, PTSD, all those things, and how that, feeds into relationships. And I think it was also important for me to say, with the relationship breakdown, is we oftentimes think about the partnership or marriage breakdown, but it was very important that sometimes friendships, sometimes family relationships, all those types of relationships, all that fall under that, is important. And so, yeah, it was. It happens. It happens so often. And I wanted to. I had to include it because it was important for people to, again, know that it happens. They're not the only ones, and know that how can I best support that person? What do I need to do? What do I need to say? And again, it's not prescriptive, but it's challenging you to just think about what may be happening, what that parent may be experiencing. And I think for professionals particularly, we have to remember that the NICU is one moment in time. There's so much life that's happened before that NICU. There's so much life that's going to happen afterwards. Yeah. And you're privileged to be with these families, to be with these parents, to be with these babies for that one moment in time. And what you do or don't do can make a huge impact on how that family heals. What you say and don't say can make a huge impact. So the breakdown can also be with that between, provider and family. And so it was important so that people can know that they can pause, that they can, let's stop with how we typically do things, what we typically say, and pause and really begin to take stock before we move forward.
I was going to move into that next about professionals, because I have to tell you, there was a story that you put in that book that I audibly gasped when I read it, of how you were treated by a healthcare professional. And so I know that part of you talk in the intro about how it's not just a book for parents and support people, but that you've also had healthcare professionals read it. And so I'm just wondering what the response has been from that community to this book.
Two things so far. I mean, it's just launched in June, so it's still relatively new, but two things from the professional community that's come out. One is that they are experiencing it themselves, but they don't know, they don't have empathetic witness. Unless something, usually when they have some sort of debriefing, it's just on the mechanical, what happened, but the emotional part is just not even, it's not even talked about. So one was that, but then the other one that's come out is professionals have said that they're not actually taught to be compassionate. They're not taught really to listen. They're not taught, they're taught how to maneuver the machines, how to, and then if something does happen, they will kind of, give it to someone else, another department. But what's come out so far from that audience is it's incredibly helpful. It's incredibly needed because they're not sure what to do or how to do it, how to say it. Not just with the families, but also with themselves.
Right.
And this is not everybody. And that's why, interestingly, many of the families that I interviewed, many of the parents I interviewed and families I've been a part of, and in my own experience, the providers, and the providers could be doctors, nurses, therapists, it could be teachers, it could be, anyone that's kind of providing you with a service. The ones who were human, the ones who were human, the ones who talked to you, the ones who showed up, those are the ones that everyone remembers. For a good reason. Everyone remembers. They also remembered their bad experiences, but the ones that really stood out, kind of was that shining light, were the ones who were with them when they lost their child. One parent talked about how the nurse, treated their baby who had died like he was living. That someone who sat down with them and explained what was happening to them when the child got another diagnosis. So all those compassionate doctors, or providers instead of doctors, that was very, very important. Because when you talked about earlier about being sort of vulnerable, I had never shared that story of how awful I've been treated, and then I also learned how to switch on and be wear this mask. I talk about that in the book, that you sort of learn how to show up in the way that people sort of assume and expect you to show up.
Yeah.
But it was important for me to share that story of anger for me, but also so that any professional reading that book can say, you know what, I need to check myself. I need to make sure that I slow down before I come in and treat this like any other condition. This is human. This is a family. This is a person who is in this space, and I need to not lose my humanity for the sake of my treatment or my service or whatever I do. So that was important. And I think that's, to be honest, Leah, I think that's, when you're talking about the healing process, we can't lose our humanity in the whole process. We cannot lose sight of the fact that we're all, that this is a very human space. Trauma is a very human experience, a very human space, and healing is as well.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask about your son. And so some of us, are on different timelines of our NICU and preemie journey. I know that as my daughter aged and as she becomes more aware of her own story, and every time I would do a presentation or talk about her in a clinical environment or otherwise, I would run it by her, because it got to a point, when they're little, they know bits and pieces, but it got to a point as she grew that I felt like, this story belongs to both of us.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering what your son thought of this whole, you writing the book, if he's read it, what his thoughts are on it, and how he feels about it out in the world now.
Yes. Well, thank you for asking me that. He gave me permission, and I asked both my husband and my son, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. What are your thoughts? Because again, although it's not a traditional tell your story book, or traditional sort of self-help book, they are, what we experience together as a family is in it. So I did ask for permission first, and I was, enthusiastically given it. The only thing he told me was to make sure that I don't talk so much in it, because he said You talk a lot. Just kidding. But the other thing is so he's read bits and pieces of, because he's a braille, so he's not able to read print because he lost his sight. But what he's doing now is reading it through his braille device, and so he connects it. It's the way that he connects the braille device to the laptop, and I've shared him the digital version. And he's reading it. And so far, because I don't know what teenagers can say, so far I've been getting thumbs up. But one of the things he said was, I've heard you and Papa talk about, some of what you experienced, but I didn't really know what you experienced. And now you talked about how, you were scared. You were scared of losing me. You were scared of, now I understand it. Probably not 100% fully, but he said, I sort of get it now. Because he was like, well, why would you be, I'm here, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. And so that was, I think it's opening his eyes to that journey, but it's also giving him, and we sort of talked about this a few weeks ago, is also giving him permission to share parts of his story, what he wants to say, what he doesn't want to say. And I think that's incredibly important when you talk about that healing. And particularly for when you have lasting effects, his effects over his vision, somebody else's effects could be something else, respiratory or mental health, or whatever it may be. And it's important for them to know that they're not broken. It's important for parents to know they're not broken. Mm-hmm. And it's important to know that there are ways to move in a forward-moving direction, to move in a better direction for yourself. And I think that's incredibly empowering and incredibly important when you're talking about, how do I take what's happened, whatever falls under this trauma umbrella, and how do I make it better for me? And that's for parents, and that's also for the babies who are now growing up in their own story as well. Mm-hmm. And even for professionals, Leah, it's important for them to say, well, how can I take what I know now and be a better provider? How can I enter into that space in a more human space, in a human way, in a more compassionate way, in a more emotionally intelligent way than I did before? Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put up the hashtag we talked about, from Rollercoasters to Carousels. If people want to connect with Gigi about her book, or to share their own comments or questions, you can use that hashtag. And was there another way you wanted people to be able to reach out to you, Gigi?
Well, they can do that, or they can go to my website, familiesblossoming.com, and connect with me there as well.
It's familiesblossoming.com. Okay, yes. I'm just putting that in the comments as well, so people can visit Gigi's website if they want to connect. Her book is also available. I easily found it and ordered it, and then read it on my vacation, and would just encourage those who, I think even for people in our own lives, we talked about this when we connected earlier, that there are friends of mine who I connected with in NICU who are also years out, who would benefit from reading this book. And so I'm going to pass it on to them as well. And so I think that is the beauty, again, of community, right?
Yes. And we are very, very, people say small, but it's a very large community. You think about 1 in 10 babies are born prematurely. There are a lot of families worldwide that are in this space. And I'm proud of you for reading it on your holiday, because it's not an easy read. That's what someone told me. It's not an easy read, but it's an important read, I think. And again, you read it when you need it, how you need to read it. But yes, it's what's also been interesting with this, Leah. It's been in the space, but then there've been many people who are not within the NICU loss and special needs space, that type of trauma, but they've experienced trauma in another way.
Mm-hmm.
And have also said, going through their emotional journey, reading my book was the first time they actually going through their emotional journey. So it can assist anyone. It could be the parent, it could be their friends and family. It can be the healthcare, the providers that are providing. So anyone who's wanting to move from where they are now to where they want to be, hopefully you can find some nuggets within that can help you do that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today and for sharing. I mean, really, I always say what an honor and a privilege it is to have people share their stories. I think we need to hold those with great value because they are. And here you put it out in the world in a book to share very openly. And so thank you so much for being willing to be vulnerable, to share that, and to bring people along on the healing journey. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Leah. It's very important for me to be able to be, part of the solution, and we're all in it together. And I think together we're better, we're stronger, we're more empowered. And so whatever I could do to assist us in that, I will. But thank you so much for having me. I've just enjoyed connecting with you even before we had the chat. Just connecting with someone else is incredibly important and very very healing in its own way to know that yes, this book is doing not just the book but the message of it. It's helping people in different places. But you can get the book on Amazon, Waterstones in the UK, get it in Barnes and Nobles, and also in Canada is now available on Indigo, which is the Canadian version of Amazon. So yeah, so it's just about 3 weeks ago now. It's now on Indigo as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your wisdom, and from roller coasters to carousels, and you've heard how widely it's available. So thank you, Gigi, for being here and for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much, Leah, and thank you to all your listeners. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us and for bringing your comments and questions. If you missed a part of today's session or you want to revisit it, you can find this Preemie chat as well as all of our past episodes on our YouTube channel and website, CanadianPreemies.org. And while you're there on that website, you can also see there are many free resources and support options that CPBF offers to families to help them on their journey. We are a charitable organization and we rely on the generous support of people like you. Your donations help us to continue to be with families of premature babies every step of the way. Together, we can create a brighter future for all preemies and their families. And I'd invite you to just mark your calendars and buy your tickets. Guess what? We have extended our early bird prices for our first ever fundraising gala, Little Lights, Big Hearts, and you won't want to miss it. There's going to be an auction. There's going to be dinner. There's going to be a really beautiful, the parents who are putting this together, they're putting together a light ceremony that will be touching and that will really bring people together, whether you're families, healthcare professionals, or just someone who has a heart for preemies. Please get your tickets while they are at a reduced price. Take advantage of that early bird opportunity. And thank you, everyone, for being here and for being a part of this community. We are the richer for it. We will see you next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Preemie Chats. Be well, everyone.